Well, ladies and gentlemen, I just wanted to go over some articles in the wake of the Israeli military strikes on Iran and a potential Iranian response here today. Iran reportedly preparing to launch 100 ballistic missiles on Israel. Before I talk about this, and they said only about 7 of them hit, with the Iron Dome neutralizing many of the Iranian missiles. Apparently, yesterday, you know how it gets reported. They say it's devastating. It's these attacks. You don't really know. It's fog of war. But today they're saying that the Israeli attacks on Iran were extremely successful. So much so to where people are questioning Iranian defense systems and the preparedness that they were not for these Israeli strikes. And it wasn't just the nuclear facilities, it was also the targeted strikes to where you can see in photos the side of an apartment building blown open, just one room completely destroyed. I'm guessing Palantir probably had some help with that in terms of the technology behind these precision strikes that have targeted their top officials, their top nuclear scientists. And they had a phone call Iran did with Trump earlier today. Now, we can do the optimistic approach when it comes to where we're potentially headed with Iran and whatever their response ends up being. We've seen in the past it's been subdued relative to what Israel's done, but now this is a major escalation by Israel. So will this call for a significant Iranian response? We can also take a look at the Russia aspect of it. Russia, who has long been allied with Iran, was looking to possibly broker negotiations with the United States and with Iran to formulate some type of nuclear deal. Trump has long said he maintains the same position. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Well, what does that mean? We got to dissect what Trump means. Can they not have any nuclear enrichment, even a civil level of the 3.67%? I believe that's what Trump means, because he was saying that about a week ago in terms of they get zero enrichment at all. They can't even have nuclear energy. And my guess is that's what the administration wants. And Iran didn't agree to that. And they were never going to agree to that. And so you could argue that, and it's been reported by Axios, some people are saying, no, it's not true. If you look at the Rubio statement yesterday, it contradicts with what Axios reported, but this has been happening. I don't think this goes back months, because there was the big article that came out a few months ago by New York Times talking about the administration saying, well, no, Netanyahu, you're not going to strike. We're going to try and come to an agreement, because Netanyahu wanted to do joint strikes with the United States in a similar case to this. Although this case, to be clear, this is not joint. This is all Israel, but Trump knew about it. And it seems like other countries within Europe knew about it because of distress signals and maritime reports that warned ships in certain areas that this attack was coming. So you can see Iran launching 100 ballistic missiles. The question is, what is the response from Iran? And does that cause Israel to counter that with their own response? They do the preemptive strikes, is what they call them. Then Iran responds with something. Will the response from the Iranians be enough to send Israel into a crisis, potentially call Israel to have the United States help them? Trump came out with a statement earlier today saying that, well, we're going to help Israel. They have a lot of our weaponry, and they're going to be getting a lot more. That was a Truth Social statement. That was really Trump's first statement. He released at around 5:50 this morning on Truth Social. So the optimistic view of this could be Iran in the past tends to not respond with over aggressiveness. And so as if there isn't that much of a response, if the Iron Dome holds, we could be looking at a weaker Iran to where they're forced to negotiate and agree to zero enrichment. And this is the other issue, though, is the Israel demands, to where there are people that are saying, and if you look at some of the intel, it's possible they may want to completely topple their government. And they've already taken out several of their top officials and government leaders. Their top leader says, we must have a strong response to the evil, despicable terrorist Zionist identity. God willing, we will respond with strength and show no mercy to them. That's their top leader in Iran. And so we've also got this. This is just the photo of it, the precision strikes that presumably killed one of their top nuclear scientists or one of their top political figures within Iran. And we also have several of these articles I wanted to talk about. This is 5 questions about what comes next. To what extent did the U.S. assist Israel? Trump publicly distanced himself from Israel's rapid lead up to the unprecedented strikes, but that's being told as like, oh, it was done on purpose. That's what Axios reported. They said it was to the public and for the Iranians to believe that Trump says, no, it's not going to happen. Now, we thought, I mean, to a degree, my question is, how far back does this go if it is true? Hopefully not very far, but I mean, imagine if this was like a 3-month thing. This is insane for them to be supposedly, at least in the public light, at odds with Netanyahu, but behind the scenes, they're planning this so the Iranians aren't ready. And like I said earlier, this was an extremely successful, just from a neutral perspective, they're reporting extremely successful operation in terms of the Israelis striking what they wanted to strike and not being intercepted, not being interrupted by the Iranian air defense. And so part of that, and it was also reported that Israel wanted to have meetings with Iran to lull them to sleep even more. And so Trump, what extent did the U.S. have? You know, Trump wants to portray to the American people, I mean, because there has to be some self-awareness here to realize that there's this whole idea of no new wars. Technically, right now, you don't classify this as a war. I want to see what the Iranian response is to see how far this escalates. But there have been strikes in the past, not to this level, not to this extent, to where they're targeting opposing leaders, which will ratchet up the response you would think from Iran, which is why people are treating this differently from the targeted operations in 2024, 2 of them in specific. And the question is, how much does this escalate with an Iranian response? Does that cause Israel to demand help from the United States? Trump has tweeted out that, well, or he's Truth Social, that we will help Israel with more weapons, significantly more. And is that a negotiating ploy by Trump to try and back Iran into a corner and basically call their bluff and say, you're not going to respond with a because there's, when you're talking about the Iranian military and their army, a lot of people say they're weak and they're disheveled and they're unorganized, but to what extent? Because you would think they would still be capable of depending on their allies, depending on what Russia does, they would still be capable of having an extended war with Israel, with the United States very likely helping Israel. What will the scale and scope of Iran's retaliation look like? Very, very important to deciding what happens after that, because if it's a significant escalation by Iran after the Israel strikes, Israel is going to call on the United States for a counter to that, and then that's when you get some real bad regional war action and extendedly longer war within the Middle East. Will Trump resist mission creep? Even if the U.S. didn't assist Israel, Iran shares this view the American military assets aren't targeted in its retaliation, and that's why they evacuated the military assets or the military people and the diplomats, because they're in areas that would be closer for the Iranians to strike. And you have Rubio coming out yesterday and saying, do not strike our bases, because could you imagine that? And then it's like the administration's like, well, now we're forced to enter, because right now the vast majority of the American people want this neutral approach. Now, if you look into this situation, it's really not neutral. We are helping Israel. I mean, that's the reality of it. And I've had people that they say, and they refute it, and they say, just because we fund them, that doesn't mean we're part of this war. Well, you look at the top funders of Israel. I mean, of course, the Middle Eastern countries, if Iran goes to war with Israel, they're also going to, by extension, blame the United States for sure. I mean, what do you think Russia and Ukraine is, with Ukraine having, in some cases, better military technology than Russia? Do you think that's because of Ukraine's buildup? No, it's because NATO is giving them a lot of their arms. Trump might still get dragged into the conflict if the deep state convinces him to authorize air defense support of Israel and or joint offensive operations. I mean, I feel like they already have air defense. It was reported that the U.S. and the U.K. were shooting down Iranian missiles last night. I don't know if that's false, but yeah, Trump could. It definitely risks Trump splitting up the base if this goes through, and it is an extended military situation within the Middle East. Why couldn't Iran better defend itself? That's another question, because these strikes were extremely successful. Initial reports suggest that Israel really did indeed hit Iran very hard, thus raising questions about Iran's air defense systems. What comes next if a major regional war is somehow avoided? A major regional war can be avoided if Iran doesn't significantly retaliate against Israel, though a possibly choreographed show might follow. Israel is humbled by Iran's outmatched retaliation, which the U.S. doesn't significantly help it defend against. Well, that seems unlikely. I mean, I feel like if there was a significant reaction by Iran, Israel would demand U.S. support and it would escalate even further. Or Iran absorbs Israel's second blow and doesn't retaliate. If the nuclear talks aren't resumed swiftly lead to a deal on the U.S. terms, then a cold peace might follow, characterized by intense hybrid warfare against Iran. Well, there's a lot of vagueness in terms of that last point if there is no deal, and it would be on the U.S. terms, because if Iran does want to negotiate still, I mean, I don't know if the talks are happening on Sunday. Those talks were always fizzled. I mean, the last, they were meeting 4 or 5 times, and they had said every time that they had met, the meeting time had gotten less and less and less. So it didn't seem like those talks were moving anywhere anyways, which is probably why this happened. I mean, Trump knew this was going to happen. You could even tell by what Trump was saying the days before. He said, you're just going to have to wait and see. And they were removing diplomats, and they were removing troops, and they were setting it up. They knew that this was what was going to be happening. But they even say, like, ooh, Trump and Netanyahu set them up. Trump was even saying days before that something changed within Iran, and it was almost like a warning to them. And then you have the Israelis, I mean, to the point, counting down the seconds of Trump's 60-day threat. It was a 2-month threat to where there was the window to negotiate a nuclear deal. And I'm guessing Trump wanted Netanyahu to respect that, to make at least Trump have some dignity left. And they count down the seconds, and then on day 61, and Trump Truth Socialed this out, on day 61, the attack happens. So they're counting down the seconds and then doing it, probably not to undercut Trump, to make it seem like Trump is powerless in this entire thing, and that, is probably why. But I don't really take those when Trump says that seriously, because there's been a lot where he'll say there's a deadline and then it either gets extended or nothing happens. I mean, it's just the reality with Trump. But in terms of this, I guess he wanted Israel to wait, just because, I mean, if Israel is doing it before, this already is viewed as Israel undercutting the administration. But to what degree? I mean, there's so many Zionists within the administration. A lot of them respect this type of action from Israel. The question is, this is what it comes down to in terms of something like this, to where Israel is striking Iran. How much do you care about Iran possibly at some point developing nuclear capable weapons? But honestly, it's even worse than that if you think about it, because if you look at the potential deal they were going to do, it was 3.67% enrichment. You need 90% enrichment. Now, yes, Iran right now, because Trump ripped up the deal, which you can criticize and say was terrible, and it had an end date of only 10 years, and there wasn't a ton of oversight, and you could say that Iran was not giving accurate numbers, and they were enriching more than 3.67%. You can say all of that, but still, if you could walk out with a deal at around 3.67 cents, that's civil nuclear use, while maintaining even more aggressive oversight, and the deal has no end date like the Obama one had. I mean, it just seemed like, and you can see this is part of the reason right here. Battered Hezbollah says it will stay out of the Iran-Israel fight. This is a window for Israel. The proxies are weakened. That's the exact demonstration. You've also got the idea, and the crude oil prices, which I was looking at yesterday. What are they, around 71 right now? They spiked to 73. 73. So let's take a look at the last 6 months just to put this into perspective. We've enjoyed lower gas prices here in the United States for the better part of 2 months. In my area, 279 to 309 is where it's been at. We hadn't seen those numbers since the COVID level before the Russian-Ukraine war broke out. But I mean, I would still say, I mean, the perspective of this is crude oil is still relatively down. Now, I like crude oil. You could argue 71 is potentially a healthy range for it. I would argue I like to see crude oil anywhere from $50 to $70, 50 to 65, something like that. So it's at 71. I mean, we were in a great spot, and recently it's crept up. The reason it kept creeping up was because of the rumors that this was going to happen, and it ends up happening. And the other talk is, will they close the Strait of Hormuz? It seems unlikely. You can see it says threats to the Strait of Hormuz. In theory, Iran could halt tanker traffic in the strait for a short period of time by threatening or attacking vessels coming into the waters at the entrance to the Gulf. But the most likely response is that the United States and its allies would organize an armed convoying system with the U.S. and allied warships escorting tankers. Once convoys were in place, an attack would bring Iran into direct conflict with the United States. And so if they close the strait, there's going to be immediate involvement in terms of the United States and Iran, which is something that you would figure Iran would not like. It says they're anxious about it and want to avoid conflict with the United States if they closed the strait, because that would be bringing the United States into it, because that would have a significant effect on the flow of oil. And so we'll see what happens in terms of all of this. What I will say is the optimistic view is, well, if there's not a serious response from Iran, there's potential for some type of, I mean, you just wonder, where is Trump's head at? That's really what it is. I mean, what does Trump want? It seems like there's a difference in terms of what Israel wants and what Trump wants still, even though it's been reported they've been talking. I don't know. To me, it feels like Trump still wants some type of deal with Iran on the U.S. terms now, and potential leverage has been lost by Iran with these strikes from Israel. And if there's not a serious response, I mean, we saw, and it's not the same thing, but it is a comparison with India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan exchanged strikes. There was really no talk of a ceasefire. It was escalating. And then it got to the point to where Pakistan said, well, we might have to use a nuclear weapon. Now, we know, I mean, you can debate whether or not Iran has a nuclear weapon. If they're at 60% enrichment, they don't. Even if they do, it's, we would imagine, pretty low scale. But they have other things to threaten with for sure. Does it get to the point to where Iran threatens something and maybe some type of settlement happens? I don't know. But we did just see a situation to where there were strikes between Pakistan and India, and it was resolved through Rubio and Vance negotiating between both of those countries to where there was nearly a nuclear breakout, and it was resolved within a week or less than a week. Now, the reason this could be different is because if Israel wants the entire nuclear program destroyed, how long is that going to take? You're talking about many of these facilities being in caves, under the grounds of caves. I mean, it seems like this is months and months and months, and, you know, heaven forbid, even longer than that. We know with Russia, Ukraine, it's over 3 years. So we'll have to see. But I think the hope is that for Trump, it seems like he still wants to negotiate. I feel like Israel would not want to negotiate. They want to, I mean, they may possibly a regime change. Minimum, they wanted to completely destroy their nuclear program. If Trump is still negotiating, it's probably something that Israel doesn't want. They likely want to, you know, something to happen to where Iran strikes U.S. bases and then the U.S. is roped into it. And so that's what we're trying to avoid. And that's what we were always trying to avoid. But we're seeing the steps being taken to get us closer to there. So that's what we really don't want. It's this prolonged war. And even the people that support Israel and stuff, and they love this, and it's like, well, Iran could get a nuclear weapon. This is just so unpopular now in the United States in terms of this type of interference. And you can say, well, Rubio said, no, there's no interference. The problem is we're funding them, and Trump comes out with a statement and says, yeah, we're going to keep funding them. And you can say, well, this is negotiation. Yeah, but Israel doesn't want to negotiate anything. They didn't want the negotiations to happen anyways, and they already got their way in terms of supposedly this coordinated strike with Trump and Netanyahu kind of having this secret agreement to where there was going to be this strike and they were going to act like, ooh, we're not, you know, Trump opposes this. But the thing is was this happening for months? I mean, it's because they wanted to originally strike like 2 months ago, and that's when Waltz had to be reassigned out of the administration. Well, I guess technically he's still in the administration, but a lesser role. So I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going around. Maybe the Axios report is false. I'm not sure because there still is this different messaging. If Trump still wants to negotiate with Iran, he could be thinking, well, we've got a lot more leverage now. This attack was extremely successful, and the counter by Iran has so far been. I mean, we'll see. Who knows what they're going to do, but there's been a lot of deterrent from the Iron Dome, is what I've heard, in terms of like only 7 missiles hitting and no casualties within Israel. And so, if their response is extremely weak, that gives the United States more leverage to negotiate a better nuclear deal. There's not any nuclear left. They're trying to destroy all of their facilities. Or, I mean, but I'm just saying in general, it's like, if there is still going to be a deal, the United States, depending on this Iranian response, we might have more leverage to negotiate from a better position of power. And so that's what I think Trump probably wants. But you are risking a wider conflict. You don't exactly know. Although we'll see, because it's been reported that Netanyahu was going to be speaking with both Putin and Trump today, and Russia came out and said this is terrible. China also came out and said it's bad, and they want to help with peace within this conflict. And certainly it affects. I mean, you're talking about oil-rich areas. It's going to affect the global markets. To what degree? That'll depend on how high this escalates and if the strait ends up being closed by Iran. But if that happens, there's probably going to be a direct involvement from the United States and Iran, because they're talking about sending a convoy in there, and then that'll where the involvement will be. So it's a tedious situation. It is, but if there's not a big Iran response, you're talking about really gaining significant leverage over them. And if there's not a huge support from Russia of Iran, which we'll see, because Putin is supposedly talking to Netanyahu, maybe that tells us that there isn't. And maybe that tells us that Iran is kind of left on their own. And if they don't want the United States to be involved in this and to potentially really destroy their country, they need to agree to some type of deal under the U.S. terms that we want. And so maybe that's it. But we're trying to be more optimistic, and maybe it's a few days, but the idea is it could drag on. Nobody really knows exactly. I mean, look at the Russia-Ukraine thing. When it broke out, people said it was going to be 2 weeks, and they take the hot wars, when they kick up, it's impossible to say exactly when they're going to end. And whether or not, I mean, we'll see what happens in terms of a response. Is this a war? Is this just strikes? We'll see. But either way, guys, like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Links to that's always in the description.